If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, filthy movie lovers. My name is Gentry Austin.
And I'm Casey Scott.
And we're the hosts of the Sin Syndicate, film podcast for something weirdos, anti-criterion bros, and Joseph Sarno aficionados. Join us semi-weekly as we peer into the adults-only theaters and sticky-floored cinemas of the golden age of sexploitation, when the morals were loose, the laws were murky, and the intercourse was all simulated. Find us now on the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Weirding Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? No, he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I'm HP, your co-host, and with me as always is my co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you this evening?
I like tap dancing.
This is going to be a special episode of Night, Mr. Walters. We're changing it up a little bit this week. This is a Halloween-themed episode, and we're going to be doing something a little different. We did this with DC Cab a few episodes ago. Now we're going to cover the Halloween that almost wasn't. This was written by Coleman Jacoby and Bruno Caliandro, and it was directed by Bruce Bilson. The Halloween That Almost Wasn't premiered on ABC on October 28, 1979. It was also available on VHS in 92 under the alternate title, The Night Dracula Saved the World. I confess, this wasn't something that I was even aware of, but Father Malone, you're the one who brought this TV special to my attention and suggested we cover it. Did you watch this when you were a kid? Does this go that far back? Did you watch it when it was originally broadcast?
HP, I'm actually fucking shocked that you had never seen this before. Yes, this was a staple of my childhood.
Really? Was it rebroadcast seasonally? I know it was on Disney Channel for quite a few years, but yeah, I never came across this. I'm more familiar with the Tim Curry TV movie, The Worst Witch. That's usually the one that comes to mind seasonally. But no, so you watched this as a kid several times.
Well, The Worst Witch was on HBO, so you needed to have HBO, but HBO would play the fuck out of it. Whereas Disney Channel would play it maybe twice, 3 times in the month of October. And I definitely remember watching it then, but I also remember having a videotape of this and watching it endlessly at age like 10 or 11. What's funny about it is, and it's odd how memory works, but I remembered that this was a thing, and I remember that Judd Hirsch had played Dracula, so that stuck in my head, and because Halloween was coming up, that's why I suggested it. So even though I had watched this endlessly as a child, I had virtually no memory of it until it started, and then I remembered everything.
In my research, I found this on YouTube. Everyone can go see it in its entirety, including commercials on YouTube. We'll talk about it. But pretty much, if you look at the comments, there's a lot of what you're describing, which is, oh my God, I watched this as a kid and it completely left my brain until I found my way to this YouTube clip. And now it's all come flooding back. Like this is what you're describing is a pretty common thing with this particular show. Obviously, the reason why we're covering this on a Taxi podcast is because it does feature Judd Hirsch playing Dracula, and we'll talk about that as we get into the episode. But let's dig into the some of these production credits a little bit, just to get that out of the way. Bruce Bilson, the director, was a prolific TV director. He had credits going back all the way to the mid 60s. He directed episodes of Get Smart, Bewitched, Bonanza, all the way through the 80s and 90s with the original Flash TV series. He did Touched by an Angel. He did Dynasty. He was a real TV lifer. Jacoby, one of the writers, was primarily writing for TV in the 50s and 60s. He wrote for The Red Buttons Show, The Phil Silvers Show, The Milton Berle Show, and many other series with the and show in the title. The Halloween That Almost Wasn't was his final credit, in fact. Halloween That Almost Wasn't is one of only 3 credits for Bruno Caliandro, and it's the only writing credit on his IMDb. Besides co-writing and associate producing The Halloween That Almost Wasn't, he also produced something called The Fourth King in 1977, which appears to be an animated retelling of the Three Wise Men story, which involves animals. He also produced something called Heroes of Conscience, a tribute to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which I did not feel like investigating further.
Can't imagine why.
We open this TV special on a close-up of a coffin that pops open to reveal Judd Hirsch in his Dracula finery. I have to say, I constantly was flip-flopping back and forth between really respecting his commitment to the Bela Lugosi of it all. There was also a real cognitive disconnect between Alex Rieger and this ridiculous movie. But I have to say, he committed to the Bela Lugosi bit of it, and he was actually quite compelling at times. What did you think of his portrayal of Dracula?
Well, I'll tell you 2 things. First of all, this was my first introduction to Judd Hirsch at 6, because I did see this when it was first broadcast. So to me, the guy on Taxi was Dracula for a good portion of my first view of Taxi.
Wow.
Now rewatching it, I'm just this is going to be an echo chamber of an episode because he's great. I can't see Rieger here at all. He's playing a whole other style of comedy here. This sort of broad children's farce, like a pantomime show kind of a thing. I think you'd call it in England. Meanwhile, giving the most committed Bela Lugosi impression. If he had looked more like Lugosi, he could have played it instead of Martin Landau. Landau as Lugosi, Ned Wood.
Yeah, my feeling about watching this now is the production values are what they are, but the vibe I got was, as kids, I remember 6, 7 years old, and we would go on these field trips, and sometimes we would go to like the North Shore Music Theater to see a production of Rapunzel or some fable put on for the kids. And it was all very low budget. That was the vibe I got from this, that everybody seemed very committed to making this as broad and funny and gentle as possible for the children. Having said that, it was clearly not made for very much money. I think it was really made on pretty much one set. Special effects are lacking, especially with modern sensibilities, but there is a sweetness, and we'll get into this as we talk about it a little bit more.
This is also obviously my introduction to John Schuck. This is technically my childhood Frankenstein. All of these monsters, except obviously we'll get there as we get into the plot of this, but a couple of these monsters, even as a young child, I rejected them, and I really reject them when I watch them again now.
Well, for people who maybe aren't as familiar with Father Malone's other work, his other podcasts, his other interests outside of Taxi, he is a real dyed-in-the-wool horror fan. I don't know any bigger fan of horror, any bigger historian of horror in movies, books, TV shows, the works. So I'm not a bit surprised that even as a youngster, you were already rejecting their depictions of, let's say, the Mummy or the Wolfman. But we'll get to that as we dig into this episode. We cut to Dracula's familiar. I guess you'd call him. Igor is Dracula's familiar, or his servant. He's sitting in front of the TV with a huge bowl of popcorn, Now, Igor is played by classic character actor Henry Gibson. Everybody knows Henry Gibson. You all know him. He was the head Illinois Nazi in the Blues Brothers.
I love that that's what he'll be remembered for, wearing that fucking Nazi uniform when he had such a long, illustrious career. Like, he was one of the regulars on Laugh-In, and he's absolutely menacing as the sort of the head of the Klopek family in The Burbs. This is another Joe Dante thing. My God, all of the Night Mr. Walters are going to have a Joe Dante connection. He's a spectacular actor. And it's just sad that he'll always be, we're going to get that son of a bitch.
But he's so good in it. I mean, that's why he's indelible. But you're right. This is another case of 6 degrees of Joe Dante. Like you said, he was in The Burbs. He was in Inner Space. He was in Gremlins 2. He's been in a bunch of Joe Dante movies. So great to see Henry Gibson here. And he does a very good Igor. He's got the accent down perfectly. He's very good. He's watching the television, like I said, and the TV cuts in with a special update from the Transylvania News Department. They're reporting that Dracula has convened a meeting with all of the world's top monsters at his castle. This is the day before Halloween. This is apparently lending credence to a rumor that Halloween is in danger of disappearing forever. This confuses the Count and Igor, who wonder who could have started the rumor. The newscaster stresses the impact that this news would have on children all over the globe. And at this point, we cut to probably the worst still shot of a building I've ever seen. A matte title reads "Somewhere in Transylvania," and it does this pan in, but you can tell it's not an actual shot of a house. It's like someone's zooming in on a still picture of a house.
Taxi has better production value. Their poor man's process is better than anything going on here as far as spooky castles and shit.
So we cut inside the house where a family that in no way sounds like Transylvanians, they're preparing for Halloween. There's 2 little kids and their parents. And the parents, they're watching the same news report that Dracula and Igor are watching, but the parents are schooling the kids on the origins of Halloween, while the kids themselves are fretting about whether there'll even be a Halloween because of what's being described in this news report. We cut back to Dracula and Igor as they're watching this newscast with interest. The newscaster openly wonders whether Dracula himself is the source of this rumor. And with a steely glare, Dracula refutes this allegation to the television. He's really, like you said, there's not a trace of Alex Rieger anywhere in his depiction. It's almost like the newscaster is fomenting this unease amongst the population because he's wondering if this is the end of Halloween altogether. As we cut back to the Transylvanian family, they're still discussing the origins of Halloween.
Yeah, can I just say that I'm positive most of my knowledge of Halloween must have come from this. I mean, I remember even as a young person knowing that Halloween it's derived from All Hallows Eve, and that they had jack-o'-lanterns because at one point they had bonfires to drive away the spirits. You wore costumes to confuse them. Like basic Halloween things just jammed in as exposition with this family that we're never going to see again. I mean, until the end. I gotta say, this is a kids program that has a lot of good things going for it. I know this is dumb, stupid kids humor most of the time, but a lot of the information being delivered to the children, and I was one of them, are pretty good things.
Not having much knowledge in the way of the origins of Halloween, I was going to ask you, obviously it's not a truly historic perspective on they're dumbing it down or they're watering it down for children, but I guess what you're saying is that there's some truth to how they're describing the origin of the holiday. Is that not the case?
Yeah, I mean, they don't go in and say, well, it's based on Samhain, which is an old Celtic holiday that marked the end of the year. They don't get quite so granular with it, but the basic ideas are there. Yes, the idea of on that night, you want to lock your doors because the walls between this world and the other are thin, and the dead might come a-calling and stuff. Costumes would confuse them, and bonfires would confuse. Basically, the entire holiday is based on confusing the dead. And all of those things eventually got adopted into these quaint practices we know today. But they're not lying to these children here at the beginning. This isn't the Grither.
We cut back to Dracula and Igor. And at this point, Dracula has asked Igor to convene a meeting amongst all of the world's monster representatives to come and talk about this crisis that they're now facing. Sensing the monster's arrival, Dracula dispatches Igor to let them in, and we go to commercial. Now, side note, because like I said, I watched this on YouTube with commercials and all. This show was sponsored by Kenner.
The Halloween that almost wasn't. Brought to you by Kenner, makers of long-playing toys for children of all ages.
This episode is filled to the brim with Kenner toy commercials, everything from Star Wars toys.
It's Star Wars radio-controlled R2-D2. 2 9-volt and 2 C alkaline batteries not included. You can make R2-D2 move, beep, and flash his light by wireless radio control.
Hey, let me try it.
You can make R2 move forward.
Look out, Dad!
Backward, turn and beep.
My turn, Dad!
Radio-controlled R2-D2 from the Star Wars collection by Kenner.
It's a Play-Doh.
It's the new Play-Doh Dr. Drill and Fill.
Open wide, look inside, he needs some Play-Doh tea. One goes here, one goes there, some go underneath. My, oh my, what can this be? For goodness sakes, a cavity! First the drilling must begin, then put the Play-Doh filling in. Now his Play-Doh teeth are done. Dr. Drill and Fill is fun. You can make it with Play-Doh.
The Play-Doh Dr. Drill and Fill. It's new from Kenner.
To some Betty Crocker bullshit.
Kenner's new Betty Crocker juicer blender. Food and 4 batteries not included. You can blend lots of puddings and toppings, low speed or high speed. Switch containers and the juicer will make fresh orange juice. You can mix lots of fun foods and drinks.
Betty Crocker blender, Betty Crocker juicer blender.
For little moms. Kenner's new Betty Crocker juicer blender with 2 containers and recipe book.
It's easy to forget, but this was a time when Kenner was really the name in toys. And I know you remember this time pretty vividly, I'm sure, Father Malone.
Oh, I was a Kenner devotee. They put out the Star Wars toys. So I was always going to look at the Kenner toys first, just for that reason alone. I'm not surprised that they would have sponsored like a television special so that I could just pepper it with their own ads. I'm a little surprised that they, or maybe they did, have a line of action figures from this. I would really love a Judd Hirsch as Dracula action figure and a John Schuck. I mean, you're more likely to find a John Schuck as Frankenstein because he'd end up being Frankenstein again. But
when I think of Kenner, the first and really last thing I think of are those Star Wars toys, which we all had a million. I still have a lunchbox filled with my old Star Wars figures, but I forgot that they had a bunch of other stuff. There's Betty Crocker stuff, Play-Doh. So they were really on top of the world. And I think it was actually a bigger deal for Star Wars that Kenner produced the toys for them because, like I said, they were so well established as a toy company.
Can I just say that I watched a 4K restoration of this?
I saw that one too. Wasn't that weird?
Yeah, that was the night Dracula saved the world. Thanks. So that title came up and I went, what is happening? And then the movie began. I went, oh no, here we go. But I got to say, it looked great. It looked fucking fantastic.
I was reminded when I went to see The Hobbit, the Peter Jackson movie.
It was like a 60 frame rate.
The frame rate was very high.
Like instead of 24 frames per second, it was like, it was like 75 or 100 or something like that. So it looked like you're looking through a window as if that's what we go to movies for.
It had this effect that people looked like they were moving in fast motion, even though they weren't. That's the effect of this 4K upscaling, where everything is moving very smoothly. And they mentioned AI, quote unquote, was used to produce this upscale version. And what I assume is happening is the AI is filling in those in between frames with something interpolating the frame before it and the frame after it. So it looks hyper smooth, a little spooky, not in a Halloween way, but in a weird, they're moving in a very altogether too smoothly. But anyway, you can take your pick. Those of you listening to this podcast, you can watch the good old rough version with the commercials, or you can watch this weird 4K version. But either way, you should definitely check it out. We come back from commercial. and Igor is announcing the monster's entrance. He's doing it from what I presume is supposed to be the foyer of Dracula's castle. But now this is the obligatory set decoration side note that I'm making here. Now, Taxi set decoration, this is not. The set, like I said, looks more like a kid's production of Rapunzel or The Three Little Pigs or something. But I guess that matches the overall tone and direction of the show. So I guess you could call that charming, I guess would be a charitable reading of it all. The Wolfman makes his entrance.
It seems
looking
like
more...
they're just shooting at some house in Riverside. And they threw up some wall sconces, like Beauty and the Beast style sconces. And they're like, okay, it's Dracula's castle, everybody.
Pretty much, because this show exclusively takes place inside of one castle or another. I guess there's a little bit with the Transylvanian family, but there's no outdoor photography at all. So I guess you could just, some producer somewhere, and like you said, in Burbank, had a mansion. They just put a few cobwebs, maybe some candelabras, and voila, it's Dracula's castle. The Wolfman makes his entrance, but he looks more like a guy with a lot of hair and a big beard, which I assume is to avoid scaring the kids watching this show. He doesn't look like if you showed me a picture of this guy, I wouldn't think he was a Wolfman at all. I just think this is a guy with an afro and a big beard. He's played by veteran comic actor Jack Riley. Riley is somebody who's done a lot of TV, but most notably, he appeared in a bunch of Mel Brooks movies. He was in History of the World Part 1. He was in To Be or Not to Be. And he was also in Spaceballs. Next to arrive, I think this is our favorite besides the obvious Dracula. Frankenstein is played by the simply delightful John Schuck. He's another accomplished actor who appeared in everything from The Love Boat to Law and Order. But Father Malone, which particular movie do you and I have a soft spot that he appeared in?
Star Trek 4, Undiscovered Country. Star Trek, he's in another one, right?
He's in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, and Star Trek 5, he's in 5, which is The Undiscovered Country. He plays the Klingon ambassador in both of those movies.
Okay, you ready? It's time for a shuck off, baby.
I don't know if I can compete. Obviously, my favorite line of that, I think it was in the trailer, which is why it made such an impact. He's pointing to Kirk and he says, "There shall be no peace as long as Kirk lives." So perfect.
Starfleet regulations, that's outrageous.
He's so good. He's, again, one of those actors that you know him when you see him, but you can't necessarily place each and every appearance he's made, but he's everywhere.
He's in MASH. He was one of Robert Altman's regular guys. He was on what's it called? The fucking it's a TV show.
L.A. Law?
McMillan and White. No, he was on McMillan and White.
You know what? Henry Gibson was in Nashville, another Altman movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
Interesting.
Oh, wait. I got another one.
Yeah.
We deny nothing.
What I find interesting is, and you alluded to this earlier, this appearance that he makes as Frankenstein presaged his eventual appearance as Herman Munster. This might have been the first attempt at a revival of the Munsters. It was a TV show from 1988, a series called The Munsters Today, and he played Herman Munster. And this can almost be read as an audition, because at one point he does a little soft shoe, like he tap dances as Frankenstein's monster. There's a feel of Herman Munster in what he does. So it's not a surprise that they would bring him in to play Herman Munster eventually. So he's very good.
He's a very gentle Frankenstein, which Fred Gwynne was a very gentle Frankenstein. He's an actual natural fit for it. And if you remember John Schuck, you like John Schuck, I would encourage everyone to check out Gilbert Gottfried's amazing colossal podcast, the John Schuck episode. He's still out there. He's still alive. He's still kicking around. And the interview is fucking spectacular. He doesn't talk specifically about this special, but he does talk about his involvement with the Munsters and how he expected it to not go for any length of time, and then ended up being Herman Munster for many years.
So they're the two main sort of, let's face it, they're the two main monsters that come in, because there's also, they introduce us to someone named Zabar the zombie. I'm not familiar. I can only assume that Zabar, the zombie, was an invention just for this particular show. And they also bring in the mummy, but the mummy is just a guy. He looks like toilet paper wrapped around him. The mummy does nothing in this.
The
Was
Mummy
that
is
the
terrible. Yeah, that's the
yeah.
one I outright rejected. When I saw it again today, I was like, what are they even thinking? This toilet paper wrapped fucking thing. This is supposed to be the mummy from ancient Egypt? No. I rebuke thee.
Yeah, the two of them, Zabar and the mummy, have nothing to do. And I'm not sure why they're even here. I guess I know why the mummy would be here, but I don't know why they gave them nothing to do. Maybe because this is a 25-minute television special and there's only so much to go around.
I know for certain, HP, that even at the time of airing, that I felt like their conception of a zombie was too old fashioned. Even though we were getting all the classic Universal monsters here on display, Frankenstein, Dracula, and in the way that they appeared in the Universal like uh, Drac here is the traditional Dracula. I mean, the pendant and all,
Yeah.
and the widow's peak. So to see this like this sort of white zombie version of a zombie, like
Yeah.
the ghoulish undead, but he's probably controlled by some zombie master somewhere. I don't know. It felt quaint, whereas the other monsters just felt like classics.
They didn't really go for the classic Wolfman. That's my only knock against how they've portrayed the Universal monsters. But I have to believe, like I said, it's got to be because they didn't want to terrify children watching this. This was just a guy with a lot of facial hair, and that was the extent of it.
Lon Chaney, it wasn't.
No, not at all.
Nor was it even Oliver Reed.
The final, and maybe the most important monster next to Dracula makes her appearance. It's the witch. She's played by Mariette Hartley. Mariette Hartley has done a ton of mostly TV roles. Her career, I was shocked to find out, is over 60 years. She's been acting in TV, some movies, but mostly TV. But for folks who grew up in the 70s and 80s, like you and me, Father Malone, we probably know her best from her series of Polaroid commercials that she made, where she starred alongside James Garner, the Rockford Files, James Garner. Do you remember these commercials?
Well, I didn't until you just said that, but now I do.
Because, well, she's interesting because I know her by name and I remember her from childhood, but honestly, it was impossible for me to pin down a specific TV show or movie or a certain role that she was iconic for. But I did remember these Polaroid commercials because they were omnipresent. They probably made 200 of these commercials. It was ridiculous. They were so popular at the time, they led to rumors that the two of them were married because they would always be in these Polaroid commercials. They'd be bantering playfully back and forth. They were both married to other people, but they were so iconic in that time. People maybe under the age of 40 don't know any of this.
Okay, I'm beautiful. Now, on to the party.
I want proof of this.
No, you don't. We're late already.
Don't worry, this is the world's fastest developing color. You see it in seconds now, not minutes.
Made for each other. Well, there's your proof. Go on, get it all out of your system.
The Time Zero One Step and Time Zero Supercolor film are made for each other. That's why they both come in Polaroid's new Made for Each Other pack.
Feel better now?
Okay, let's go.
You taking that to the party?
Why not? I'm taking you.
Made for each other.
The witch is annoyed at having to get up in the middle of the night, but Igor assures her that Dracula is going to explain everything. And Dracula makes his grand entrance by flying in as a bat, only to crash in a slapstick manner into a window. It can't be overstated how much commitment Judd Hirsch brings to the table as Dracula, because he smashes into this window, he transforms back to Dracula, and he's pressed his face against the window, and it's all very, very cute, but he's so committed, and it's really fun to watch. I get the sense that they all were really having fun with this because it's a trifle. There's really nothing to it. Dracula warns the assembled monsters that somebody has started a rumor that Halloween is going to be canceled, and he commands them to proceed because specifically he commands the witch because apparently she needs to fly across the moon for Halloween to officially commence. If she doesn't fly across the moon, Halloween does not go on, which is interesting. That's apparently some bit of Halloween lore that I wasn't familiar with.
See, they had to front load us with so much fact because they were going to be making up so much bullshit for the rest of it.
This is the main conflict of the show. The witch says to Dracula that she wants to quit. Apparently, she is the one who started the rumor that Halloween might be canceled, that Dracula was the one who started this. No, she's the one who started all of this business in the first place. She's tired of being the witch. She's tired of getting made fun of for being ugly and for being feared. She even questions why Dracula is the leader of the monsters and not her. She ends up unfurling a scroll with a comically long list of demands that must be met for her to fly across the moon.
HP, you got to appreciate a fucking labor dispute at the center of the children's fucking wacky comedy.
I guess that is what this is at the core of it, is that she's going on strike, right?
It's so fantastic. And to think this is 79. So I don't want to say that this was a very formative, unknowns to myself part of my life, but to have a strong female character, because she's the lead ultimately. She's the villain, but really she's the protagonist. And where we end up with her, and the fact that why is Dracula just the de facto leader? Like, putting aside the genderness of it, it is important that we had a strong female doing it, but putting that aside, like, what gives this guy the right? He's been undead longer than the rest of us. Fuck him. He didn't do anything. You know who starts this whole thing? Me. This broom, that moon, baby.
She is, in fact, threatening to go on strike until her demands are met. And to your point, these demands are actually somewhat reasonable. The only one I might question is she demands that he go disco dancing with her, but we'll get to that in a minute.
That's not part of the initial salvo, but
oh, that comes later.
I want part of the merchandise, which I love because that's the one that hurts Dracula the most. There goes my big bucks.
There's no reason why she can't have a piece of the leadership of the monsters. Why not give her a little bit more cut of the action here?
Yeah, she's not asking to take over, by the way. That's a Dracula move. She's asking for a seat at the table.
It might be telling that none of the other monsters have anything to say. You would figure that maybe they would back her, but they neither back her. I guess they, in an unspoken way, they back
That's
Dracula.
labor cowed by management. That's we know what that is. They just know what side of the bread their butter is on, okay? Frankenstein has a wife at home. We know that at least. He's got a family to support. He can't afford to lose his job.
What better way to indoctrinate children and into the idea of unionization than a Kenner-sponsored monster show? It's fantastic.
Fucking worked.
It did, and it happens to be the right move.
And then I went and I bought some fucking Star Wars toys.
Dracula refuses, and he dispatches his minions, the monsters, to stop her in a bit of hard day's night, high-speed chasing around one hallway of the castle. It's very low budget, like I said. She gets away, but Dracula turns into a bat to try and catch her. Unfortunately for him, he fails to notice that it's almost daylight. The witch says to him, hey, it's almost sunup. You better get back to the castle. So his plan for the moment is thwarted. He gets back in the nick of time, and after a little bit more slapstick comedy, we cut to another word from Kenner, and we cut back to the castle.
Igor, what did I tell you about the gate to the tomb? Open at night, closed in the day. Open at night, closed in the day. Sorry.
So good. We cut back from the commercials. We're back in the castle. The monsters are watching the newscaster still forecasting the end of Halloween. And we go back to our weird sort of, I kept thinking about Willy Wonka. Remember the movie Willy Wonka was filmed in Frankfurt or something. I don't know exactly where it was filmed, but it's very European looking, but it's stocked with a lot of American and English kind of actors. So it creates this bizarre vibe where the architecture is German, but the people are American. And that's kind of what we have here. We have this Wonka-esque family. They're fretting about the end of Halloween still. The kids are going out of their minds, worrying about this whole time, by the way, as the family is forecasting the end of Halloween, they're making up the kids in their costumes. I think the little boy is going as like Raggedy Ann or Raggedy Andy or something. And the little girl is going as a witch, which will become
Scarecrow.
the scarecrow. Oh, is it a scarecrow? I thought it was Raggedy Ann and Andy kind of thing.
Come on.
But I
man.
guess he is a scarecrow. The monsters are also concerned with what they're going to do if there's no Halloween. But once again, Dracula rallies them to go to the witch's castle and take her by surprise and presumably force her to, it's like a strike breaker trying to go in and make the people go back to work, I guess. We cut to the witch. She's applying makeup in her mirror as Dracula kind of looks on. The monsters grab her, and this is that moment that Dracula tries to hypnotize her. But inexplicably, and I didn't know this is something a witch could do, she casts some kind of spell that causes a painting of the Three Musketeers to come to life and start battling the
Come to
monsters.
life to defend her. I didn't know
But-
witches could do that either, but it's anything's possible with witchcraft. So makes sense.
They just intimidate the monsters.
Don't they slash the cement candelabra that Dracula is parrying them with?
Oh, you're right. They do slice up the candelabra, which scares them even more.
those-
So I guess they are real.
They're real. You
Uh,
can't mess with a bride of Satan.
No, definitely
You got
not.
access to things you can only imagine.
The witch gets away, but Igor has taken her broom and they go, she's barricaded herself now. This is hopeless to try and describe this because it happens so fast. They go to the room that she's barricaded herself in, and Dracula turns into a tiny bat to try and slip underneath the door. In order to get to be a small bat, he has this chant that he does saying, teeny tiny bat, teeny, and his voice is going higher and higher and higher to become the small bat. So you get Judd Hirsch, actually his voice rising in pitch naturally.
Teeny tiny bat, 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 teeny tiny bat.
More slapstick ensues. I think she hits him with a broom to get him to shoo him out of the room. And he becomes Dracula again with two black eyes because he's been hit with this broom or stick or something.
At one point, John Shuck, Dracula is accusing him of like being kind of a publicity whore. And he says, can't believe you're out there like tap dancing for the people. And John Shuck's like, well, I like tap dancing. And then he's standing, and of course Dracula steps on his foot, ha ha ha, right? But is this not a reference to Young Frankenstein, which was very popular at that moment?
I got that vibe as soon as Frankenstein made his initial appearance because Igor says something to him like, oh, you've got some fancy footwork. And Frankenstein says, oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. And he does a little tap, like a soft shoe routine before Dracula comes in and interrupts it and does all that stuff. The fact that he's dancing at all in the Frankenstein getup is only going to invite comparisons to Peter Boyle and Young Frankenstein, right? But was Young Frankenstein, what year was Young Frankenstein? Was that 70, was it 79? Surely not.
77, if anything, maybe even earlier.
Young Frankenstein was 1974.
Wow.
That is much earlier. I didn't expect that. Clearly an indelible image of Peter Boyle doing Me and My Shadow with Gene Wilder. The witch makes some more demands of Dracula, including, as we mentioned earlier, having Dracula take her disco dancing. Ultimately, she decides to quit anyway because she says no one likes a witch. But just at that moment, the kids from that weird Willy Wonka family come in and they beg her not to quit. This moves the witch. I got to say, Mariette Hartley is fantastic. The little girl says, oh, you're my favorite. I dressed up as you. And Mariette Hartley, as the witch, says, oh my goodness, you look just like me. You really love me? It's silly. It's such a goofy TV special, but damn it, Mariette Hartley sells the hell out of the fact that this witch is moved by these little kids' love of her and the holiday. The kids tell her they love her just the way she is, which I think is really the central point of this whole thing is really, love who you are. Don't worry about what people think of you. Love yourself for who you are. And I just think it's it was a nice, beautiful sentiment in the midst of all of this.
I think it's an appropriate end to it, but only after her demands had been met. Because if this had come beforehand and changed her mind and she just let Dracula continue as is, we would have had a problem here. But it is very sweetly affecting, and it's because of Marriott Hartley, as you said. This is a trifle of a half-hour Halloween special for children, basically just existing to sell toys. But you can't fuck with sentiment when it's portrayed so realistically,
The witch is so moved by the love of these two kids that she finally decides she's going to fly over across the moon and save Halloween. We see a very poor special effects shot of her flying across the moon. You see the monsters and two kids watching from their little window in the castle. What's odd is a little jarring is they do a freeze frame, which was a very common thing to end a show on in the 70s and 80s. But unfortunately, it's frozen at a moment where the kids are not smiling at all as they're watching the witch. They almost look sad. They caught them at a very bad moment in the freeze frame, and it like zooms in. I found that a little bit, I don't know, it was an odd ending to this part of the show.
Well, they want to let us know that even though there's a happy ending here, that labor must be vigilant in the face of management from here on out, that these are away if we just turn our heads for a second.
So we cut to more Kenner commercials, and we cut back to the sounds of generic disco music. It's some sort of Monsters Club.
But not the Monster Club. I mean, they should have gone to the Monster Club, but this is a Monster Club.
The witch does this Wonder Woman style spin in the middle of the dance floor, and she transforms from the witch into the beautiful Marriott Hartley. She's wearing, she looks gorgeous, it has to be said. She offers her hand to Dracula to get him to dance because, as we noted earlier, he agreed to all of her demands, including taking her disco dancing. Now, this might be the most embarrassing part of the whole episode for me. Dracula flings his cape off, revealing a John Travolta-esque Saturday Night Fever white suit underneath it. And he does, I don't know what you call the move, but it's the classic John Travolta pointing up at the sky and coming down and up. It's all too embarrassing for me to even think about Father Malone, these disco moves that Judd Hirsch does. Nevertheless, he takes the witch's hand and they boogie with the rest of the monsters. And that's the end of the episode.
No, it's not. It never ends. The disco continues. I loved all of the disco stuff. I loved the white suited disco gross person Dracula and Marriott Hartley and all these dancing things. Here's my question as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
When our story began, it was the night before Halloween, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the whole story takes place during Halloween, the thrust of the action. And it ends with the witch flying over the moon, thus Halloween can happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it like really late at night at this point? Isn't it basically midnight? So isn't she really inaugurating All Saints Day? Didn't Halloween already happen? Didn't those kids just go trick or treating? Like, who cares if she flew over the moon? If this were, she has to fly over the moon on midnight of Halloween so Halloween can commence. That makes sense. This didn't make any sense to me. Traditionally, as children, you remember this, I'm sure, when you would go trick or treating, the sun was still up. And maybe you got into twilight, a little bit of darkness, but basically Halloween for children was over by the time the moon was up. The only people she was going to affect with her moon thing were like slutty nurses and, guys dressed as boob inspectors.
The FBI, that's the federal body inspectors or female body inspectors. Is that what you're talking about.
That's right. That's right. The socket that the couples wants, like a socket and a plug. Like, if their Halloween was going to be ruined, maybe Marion Hartley should have taken that year off.
Maybe we're drawing a distinction between the commercialized sort of pretend Halloween versus the actual, the supernatural part of it that somehow figures into all of this. I don't have a good answer for you, but it's certainly food for thought. That's the Halloween that almost wasn't. But there will be no yellow light review on this because it does not
Or yellow
need
light.
it. This thing gets, how many yellow moons do you give? No,
Or jack-o'-lanterns.
before we wrap up, I have one last question for you, Father Malone. Any particular memories of trick-or-treating from that age range, 5, 6, 7, 8? Any favorite costume that you had around that time? Give me your 2 favorite costumes and some memory associated with trick-or-treating.
I remember going out as Indiana Jones the year that Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. I remember that specifically because my dad did my makeup and he gave me a 5 o'clock shadow, which I thought was the fucking coolest thing on earth. It made me really feel like I was that guy. That I remember particularly. And I remember years later being too old to go trick-or-treating. Nevertheless, going out with a group of friends dressed as the Droogs from Clockwork Orange. That was very memorable because we went trick-or-treating as those guys.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah. The best costume I ever had was not when I was like tiny. It was, I'm going to say I was 13, and I had purchased a Nathan Grantham mask from the Creepshow collection of masks. And then,
was it a Dawn Post mask?
I think it was a Dawn Post. It might have been a competing company. I don't want to besmirch whoever actually created the mask, but it was a good looking mask. I got to say that. I went to the Salvation Army and I bought a suit and a tie and everything. And I took that out and I like slashed it up with razor blades and I rubbed it in the dirt and everything. And I went out as Nathan Grant for Halloween. And that was my favorite costume of all time.
One memory that I have that I'm sure you remember, this is not specifically to me, but at the time, you remember those costumes you would get in a box at the drugstore?
The Ben
came, it was
Coopers.
almost, yeah, it was almost like a cake box. And they had everything from Spider-Man to the Fonz to Charlie Brown, and they all had the same basic form factor. They were like a cheap mask that was held in place with an elastic around the back of your head and a vinyl smock with something crudely printed on the front of it. If you were lucky, it might be, if it was Spider-Man, it might be a screen printing of Spider-Man's costume. But if you were going as, let's say, you could go as Gabe Cotter from Welcome Back Kotter, it might have like a montage of faces from Welcome Back Kotter in the front, which made no logical sense if you're dressing up as Gabe Kaplan.
It's the worst. I hated those. That never made sense. Like, I hate if you buy a novelty T-shirt for a movie and it has the name of a club in a movie or something, and then on the back it says the name of the movie. It's like, no. We want an illusion here. And that's how I felt as a kid. I'm sure you did too. I would just outright reject a costume unless it had the printing of the further costume on it.
That was basically overworked parents could go to the drugstore and pick out something easy. We didn't have stores like Party City at the time to make it easy for you to put a cheap costume together. So it was a shortcut to having a kid go trick-or-treating. For me, I would say one memory I have, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, Father Malone. I probably did. I was and am still a big fan of the band Kiss. And I got the Kiss Your Face makeup kit, which was the official Kiss makeup kit for kids.
Kiss, the incredible, outrageous rock group wants you to kiss your face. Introducing Kiss Your Face makeup. Just like the makeup worn by Gene, Paul, Peter, or Ace. Kiss Your Face makeup has all the equipment you need. Professional makeup, brushes, and cream remover with makeup diagrams so you can look like Gene, look like Paul, look like Peter, or look like Ace. So kiss your face and get your act together.
Kiss Your Face makeup is from Remco.
Yeah.
I was so happy. I wanted to go as Gene Simmons, but my mom wasn't confident that she could get the makeup right. So as a compromise, I was going to go as Paul Stanley because all he has really is a star over his eye, and she couldn't even get the star correct. So it was kind of the saggy star. So in a bit of trying to salvage the costume, I went out as a clown. It was basically half Paul Stanley, half clown. They put like a hat back sideways on my head. It was okay, but I always wanted to be Kiss, and I never was.
This is a fond memory of yours? Jesus Christ.
We made the best of it. One year I went out as Mr. T. That was fun. We went to Paperama, and I got a bald skin cap that had a mohawk integrated into it. And I had a jean jacket that my mom cut the sleeves off. They used like mascara to make a beard. It was great.
I'm going to need to see some photographic evidence of this.
We could reminisce about Halloween all day. That's going to do it for this special Halloween episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, where can folks find you when you're not enjoying Halloween?
I'm always enjoying Halloween every day of my life. You can check me out at Midnight Viewing. That is my podcast, Twice Week podcast, alternating segments of shows. There's stuff for everyone there, mostly anthology related, but a lot of current stuff too. Check that show out. And yeah, that's all.
I'm going to make my recommendation. I'm really loving the weekly wrap-ups you do, or the weekly roundup, I should say, with Ripley Jean, your erstwhile co-host. I love those. They're a lot of fun. It's a great way to get some interesting current reviews of things that are in the theater, things that you can find on streaming for free, and they're just funny as hell. Please check those out. I'm imploring you. You won't be disappointed. And check out his Patreon also. Great content. For myself, I can also be found on the Weirding Way Network. I am an occasional guest on the Culture Cast with Chris Dashew. I also have a Bandcamp site, hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. Please check that out. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to subscribe to this podcast, write a review, rate us. We'd love to hear from you in any way you see fit. For myself and for Father Malone, thank you so much for listening. Happy Halloween, and we'll see you all next time.
Night, Mr. Walters.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.